If you'd told me on my 64th birthday that a single slip of paper would change everything, I'd have laughed and called you dramatic. But life doesn't care about our plans. It hands you moments, sharp, ordinary, and asks what you'll do with them. Before we begin, if you've ever been told you were too much or too old, hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments. What's the one life lesson everyone should hear before it's too late? I'll read a few while we go. Now, let me tell you what happened on my birthday. When it started, I thought I was only losing a day. By the end, I had lost a life and found a new one. The morning began the way so many of my earlier mornings did. Quiet, a little hopeful. I bought a scratch-off ticket on the way to my daughter Rachel's house because, why not? A small, silly pleasure. I made deviled eggs and a tiny carrot cake, the real kind with a little nutmeg and cream cheese frosting, and I wrapped a $10 bill candidly under the plate for the kids. A little thrill for the grandkids, as I thought. When I stepped onto their patio, the house smelled of cheap cologne and charred burgers. There were plastic forks, paper plates, a banner that spelled Happy B-Day with the Y folded wrong. The kids were scattered. Phones, video games, a toddler chewing on a napkin. Jacob, my oldest, was 20 now, broad in the shoulders and narrow in patience. He was collapsed against a lawn chair, head back, exhaling smoke from a device like it was his only supply of air. I set down the cake. "Happy birthday, Mom," I said, because my voice was trained to soothe small things. Broken toys, late-night tears, scraped knees. My daughter Rachel smiled the way people do when they're running one internal script while acting another. Husband Mark busied himself with a cooler. And then Jacob, God help me, got loud with his brother over something stupid about a console. I went to step in the way mothers do. Just a gentle, tired, "Let's keep the peace today. It's my birthday," and he whirled. Close enough that I could see the white of his teeth. "You always act like you're the boss," he said. "You ain't anymore." I blinked. Before I could answer, he hit me. An open palm across the cheek so fast it sounded like someone clapped behind me. The fork fell from my hand. The slice of carrot cake slid, frosting wobbling like a small ship, and landed on the table askew. Heat lit my face, not just from the slap, but from a shame that spread into my bones. I stood still, waiting for the world to correct itself. The line where family repairs hurt stretched out in front of me and no one stepped forward. Rachel froze, her lipstick gone wrong. Mark turned to the grill as if flames demanded more loyalty. Kids glanced down at their plates. Nobody spoke. I did not scream. I did not beg. I put the paper plate on the table where it would be noticed, and this detail matters because it felt like the last of me leaving. I took the scratch-off out of my purse. I said, "I'm going to lie down," and I left. No one knocked on the guest room door that afternoon. No one came to say, "Are you all right?" The silence wasn't neutral. It was a verdict. I sat on the bed until the house sounds folded into one another, and then, as ordinary as someone getting in a car, I left. I drove until I reached a motel with a neon vacancy sign blinking like condolences, paid cash, locked the deadbolt, and put the scratch-off on the nightstand. When I scraped it, $5 million. $5 million, in blunt digits, in the middle of the night, on a generic motel tray. I laughed once, a single low sound, and then the laughter turned into a sound that had nothing to do with joy. I cried until my face dried in salt tracks on my pillow. Money didn't heal my cheek. It didn't change the taste of that slap. But it changed options. Options are the quiet sort of power people don't talk about. You can fight for your dignity. Or you can buy yourself a life where dignity is a choice again. And I chose. I did 3 things in those first few days. I claimed the money through a trust. I got a burner phone and a new name to match the new account. And I reached out tentatively to one person who had never treated me like furniture. Her name was Lily, Jacob's ex-wife. A single mom with flour on her apron and a toddler who carried around a plush bunny like it was the only currency she trusted. When Jacob and Lily were married, she treated me like a person. Not the matriarch who shows up and feeds people, not the grandma on the sidelines. She treated me as someone who existed. She used to bring chamomile when my migraines hit. After the divorce, she simply disappeared from our family narratives as if she'd never existed. I found her on Instagram, which felt both strange and inevitable, and I messaged, "You still want to bake?" She messaged back, cautious. We met in a small cafe. Lily had pinched eyes and the sort of quiet people reserve for emergencies and miracles. I told her the truth, about the slap, about the silence, about the ticket. I didn't say it like a boast. I said it like a fact. She put her hand over mine and whispered, "I'm sorry." She didn't blame me. She didn't ask for money. She showed me a spiral notebook full of recipes and a toddler who fell asleep on her shoulder. Her dream was simple and combustible, a bakery. A place not polished with Instagram filters, but real bread and honest muffins. I remember the way the light hit her hair when I told her, "Let's call it Second Rise. There's something almost sacred about building." The contractor's van smelled like oil and cigarettes. The lease involved signatures and fees and the kind of bureaucracy that politely tests your patience. We signed everything in cash. We bought a second-hand oven, a battered countertop mixer that groaned like it had stories, and a battered old front door that squeaked the way old houses do when they finally got honest weather. We hammer-sealed the name on a wood plank. We painted in crooked letters, not to hide faults but to honor them. We did a soft opening, then a quiet official opening. And the first time someone told Lily, with that exhausted awe only food can drum up, "This tastes like home, something like oxygen," returned to my chest. But revenge, the kind that lingers, after a story, doesn't come from ovens and warm counters alone. It comes from a plan written like a map, and for that I had professional help. I wanted more than comfort. I wanted consequences that matched the cruelty, direct, undeniable, public. Jacob's slap had been an act of aggression, yes, but the real betrayal was the silence that followed from those who could have stopped it and chose not to. They protected the slapper. They promoted silence as loyalty. That's why I made 2 commitments. Protect myself and make sure the world felt what I felt, the cost of indifference. I hired a private investigator. You don't need to know all the ways someone can find things they don't want to be found. What you should know is that Jacob was sloppy. He'd been loud about his life. Late-night selfies, Instagram flair, a podcast that fancied itself edgy. He had a circle of people who loved to talk. One of them recorded the slap. It was supposed to be some drunken prank video for a private feed. But the clip made the rounds. People gossip. Gossip socializes into screenshots. The PI found it tucked on a friend's cloud account, time-stamped and blunt. We didn't release it for shock. We released it for accountability. With Carla, my lawyer who looked like she might eat anyone who underestimated women of a certain age for breakfast, we filed assault charges based on evidence. We filed civil claims. We had patience and we had money and we had a story that was suddenly undeniable. Video, a timeline, witnesses who would not be silenced by the family drama. Line. Jacob went on a small podcast after that. He wanted to, control the narrative. Cue, ever watch someone try to dance while the floor opens under them? That was Jacob. He tried to play damaged son on the airwaves. He spun the story. I was abusive. I disappeared. She abandoned us after she won money. She's using it to pay off her bad decisions. People who live in loud rooms believe loud stories. Some listeners swallowed it. Sponsors nudged, then left. The employers who thought his public presence was a positive started to keep distance. But the turning point wasn't hate mail. It was a hearing. Courtrooms have a clean, honest cruelty about them. They listen. They ask for proof. They make people repeat themselves in front of strangers until the truth either stands or it trembles. Carla put together a meticulous file. The text messages found on friends' phones. The video of the slap. The bank records showing Jacob's reckless spending. The way he had bragged about buying things well beyond his means. We also uncovered, through careful digging, evidence that Rachel and Mark had been notified of previous violent incidents and had stayed silent. That mattered. On the stand, Jacob flailed. The clip was played. His face went a color people feel inside the center of their chest. That hollow, wet color of someone who knows he's been seen. Rachel was called to testify. Her voice broke. She said she froze. She said she was ashamed. She said she didn't know what to do. The judge looked at her like that deserved a weight heavier than apology. The system did not fix everything. No courtroom ever can. But the judge did what the judge could. There was a restraining order. There were fines. There was a civil judgment for pain and suffering. There was the immediate professional fallout, a job suspension pending investigation, sponsors retracting support from his podcast, messages from people who had cheered him now asking how they could have been so blind. When you watch someone you loved stumble in public, it feels like watching a house you built collapse in slow motion. When it's someone who used to tuck your hair behind your ear, that collapse is personal. But watching Jacob unravel also had justice in it. He had been given the chance to be guided by decent instincts. He chose the other path. Meanwhile, the bakery kept rising. People came because the food was good. They stayed because in a corner of a city grown complacent, here was a place that refused to let hurt be invisible. Community leaders showed up. A local food blogger wrote a piece that started with butter and ended with the sentence, "Some people use money to tear things down. Others use it to raise new things." That piece got picked up. A television segment followed. Crowds came. Lily, who once moved like she would vanish, stood at the counter and greeted people with a strength that looked like gentleness. And then the most delicious, slow piece of revenge arrived. Strangers began to contact Jacob's employers. When the video of the slap and Jacob's podcast clip circulated together under a hashtag the internet hates, protect the vulnerable, his local sponsors and his employer had to make a choice between headlines and the man who caused them. They chose to preserve their reputations. Jacob was asked to take an unpaid leave. His podcast co-hosts distanced themselves. A few of his friends, whom he believed would never turn, publicly apologized for encouraging his bravado. Rachel, my Rachel, paid a price too. Teachers' unions and family complaints are messy. Parents at her school learned about the incident and the silence. A district placed her on administrative leave while it investigated her inaction. It was not vicious, it was a consequence. The community had to ask whether silence around violence is complicity. If you're waiting for dramatic screaming or a cinematic gotcha moment, that's not how truth often lands. It lands as consequences: financial, social, quiet. People lose what they prized most: status, a job, the convenient story they told themselves about loyalty. There was one night I remember especially: Jacob, hair stuck to his forehead, standing on the sidewalk outside Second Rise, the bakery windows glowing behind him. He muttered into his phone and then raised it, filming me, as if to make me the villain or the proof he needed. He walked away, then turned, and for an inexplicable second he looked like a small, scared boy. He mouthed, "Grandma," but he didn't call. Public humiliation is a lousy teacher. Repentance is different. It isn't posed. When Rachel finally came to the bakery, not to plead, not to demand, but simply to sit with her hands wrapped around a cup of tea, she said something that landed like a pebble in my chest. "I wish I had your courage," she said. Her voice had the brittle quality of someone who had walked into a mirror and not liked what she saw. Maybe that was the worst part. She was still my daughter. That didn't erase the harm, but it made the loss sharper in places where love used to live. This is where the revenge got heavier, not meaner. People sometimes imagine revenge as a dramatic public spectacle, me shouting from a roof and hurling dirt. That's not how I wanted it. I wanted justice, and I wanted a life that did not revolve around people who used me. So I did 3 practical things with the money, the kind that leave fingerprints the world notices. 1, I funded Lily's bakery so it would not be a flash in the pan. We opened payroll, built a payroll cushion, secured suppliers who would extend credit in lean times. Businesses falter when the bills are a breath away. We cut that line. The bakery didn't just survive, it became stable. 2, I paid for legal services not just for me, but for a battered women's clinic in our county. We created a fund for counseling and emergency housing. I wasn't naive. I knew the system is slow and women wait in line and children hold quiet wounds. I wanted a practical response. That fund helped people who had real needs. That choice never felt like revenge. It felt like repairing a torn net. 3. I backed a careful, quiet legal effort that revealed the truth of what happened at that table. We paid for investigative hours, for licensed interviews, for documentation that could not be swept away under family excuses. We took nothing extra from anyone. We simply refused to make my life a place where silence was capital. When Jacob and Rachel finally stood on my porch, weeks after the restraining order was in place and sponsors were gone, their faces looked smaller, worn thin as tissue. Jacob begged, not for money, but for forgiveness. "Grandma, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to," he said, and I saw real, raw regret flicker across his features. He was not the same man who had slapped me. He sounded broken in places I could not stitch. I listened. Because that's the thing about grandchildren. Even when they misbehave, you still hear the voice you once soothed. But I didn't reach for the old script. I did not hug him and pretend it was a movie where forgiveness comes easy. Instead, I handed him a single small thing. The letter I'd written in the bakery office the night we opened. It read, "Jacob, I did not leave because you slapped me. I left because the people around you chose silence over stopping harm. I chose to make a life where I am not invisible. I have set things right. For me, for Lily, for my future. If you want a place inside of that, you will have to do the work. This is not a favor, it's accountability." He read it and looked like a man who had swallowed a bitter pill. He asked, voice small, "Will you ever forgive me?" I considered the question the way you consider winter coats in April, practical and focused. I said, "Forgiveness is not a door you order open. It's something you earn by changing. Start there, Jacob." When Rachel tried to corner me, wild, frantic, I did something I'd thought about but never believed I had the stomach to do. I put a small portion of the money into a trust that would only be accessible to her and the grandkids upon the completion of specific conditions. Counseling, volunteer hours, and documented steps showing they were accountable and contributing. Not a ransom note, a structure. A way to ensure that whatever inheritance flowed would be tied to growth, not entitlement. It's cold to some. It's mercy to others. The world could call it cruel. I called it necessary. I didn't become someone who relishes punishment. I became someone who would not be used. I turned resources toward creation, not chaos. Yet the consequences were severe for Jacob. He lost a job opportunity when a national sponsor backed out. His podcast co-host publicly disavowed him. He was left with little but his mistakes and the long private work of reassembling himself. And while he rebuilt, or didn't, our bakery, became louder with the kind of ordinary love that does not demand headlines. People who had been harmed started to bring their families. We held pop-ups for local shelter fundraisers. Milk crates turned into extra seating. Children finger-painted pie crusts under supervision. We built a place where people who had been told they were too much could be allowed to be exactly that. Whole, loud, messy. There was one exquisite public moment that still tightens my throat. An award ceremony at the local civic center. Second Rise was nominated for a Community Entrepreneurship Award because, and I love this about small towns, people notice. Not everything is a headline. Folks watch. They remember who works early and who gives away pies on rainy days. Jacob, foolishly thinking he might reclaim narrative, decided to go. He sat 2 rows behind a panel of donors and influencers, obviously hoping to be seen. When Second Rise was announced as the winner, the crowd cheered. We walked up to accept with our aprons still on. Lily's eyes filled. I felt my chest fill with a quiet that felt like vindication and something gentler. As we spoke into the microphone, Lily giving thanks, me speaking about how a community feeds itself with more than food, the camera panned and captured faces. In the back, Jacob's shoulders slumped. Rachel's hand covered her mouth. Journalists asked questions afterward. They asked, "How does it feel to rise after being ignored?" I answered, "It feels like finally being allowed to breathe." We did not gloat. We did not raise our hands in victory like we had toppled someone. We just stood there, seen. That visibility was the end of something ugly, the story where older people are invisible or victims, and young men get to make bare displays of masculinity without consequence. The world, in that small way, saw the difference between those who create and those who destroy. But I want to be honest with you. Revenge felt bitter at times. Watching Jacob collapse socially didn't make my cheeks stop aching. The money didn't cure loneliness. But it did provide me an ethical freedom. I donated with intention. I protected Lily's family. I bought back my choice to enter rooms on my terms. Days stretched into months. The bakery grew roots. People brought flyers about food drives and PTA meetings and help for immigrant mothers. We partnered with the community center. The toddler, Mia, learned to climb onto a milk crate and hand out napkins with a dignity that made strangers smile. And then, the part of the story that felt like a quiet flame. I wrote the last letter. I could have screamed. I didn't. I sat at the little office desk the night after the award and wrote to Jacob like a woman who had nothing to prove but a life to narrate. I didn't want to shame. I wanted to close the ledger. I wrote, "You were given instructions on how a family behaves. You chose to ignore them. I did not leave because of the slap. I left because everyone else decided you were more precious than protecting me. If you want to earn a place back, do the work. If you want pity, ask someone else." I left the envelope on the counter with the bakery's business card taped under it. The kind of small signature someone who had once been erased wants to leave. An imprint, not a door left open. People ask me sometimes if I regret it. If I miss the old kitchen table, the familiar, the comfort of a life where the people you love are a footstep away. Yes, sometimes. But I learned a critical thing. Comfort without truth is suffocation. I think of that day on the patio, the slap, sometimes. Not to replay the pain, but to remember the hinge moment. The thing that changed everything for me wasn't the hand that hit me. It was the silence after. The choice to walk away wasn't an act of cowardice. It was a declaration. You do not get to choose what I endure. You do not get to auction my dignity to save face. Lily's pastries became a small, stubborn miracle. People who needed work found work. The teenager who dropped in after school to study found a job restocking muffins and learned to count inventory. The bakery put up a board of community favors, pay-ahead coffee for someone who couldn't afford one, a list of donated kids' coats, a shelf for neighbors to leave food on the honor system. It's not glamorous. It's what ordinary justice looks like, neighbors helping neighbors. Months later, Jacob stood at the window of Second Rise one afternoon and watched customers I knew by name come in and out. He watched a toddler hand me a cup of fake tea. He watched a woman who once felt too much be treated like she mattered. He picked up his phone and called. I did not answer. I wasn't cruel. I had given him a clear path, work, accountability, proof, not empty words. That's more than a slap deserves, maybe. It's also less than a blind forgiveness that lets harm repeat. If you're listening and you feel small, like you've been laughed at, like your voice carries less because of age or gender or whatever else, hear me. You are not furniture. You are not props for someone else's performance of loyalty. You are people with histories and hands that have held other people up. If you have resources, protect yourself with them. If you have none, find someone who sees you and start there. My life now? I get up before dawn, open the bakery, watch dough rise, taste a crumb, and feel the warmth in my fingers. People bring their small sorrows to our counter and the world trades them a muffin for a story. I knit sometimes and teach a baking class on Thursday nights. I read to a boy who never thought a book could be interesting. I walk home under streetlights and think about the woman I've become. Not vengeful, not broken. Just someone who will not be erased. And sometimes, when the city is quiet and the ovens are off and Lily is folding napkins, I look at the little shrine we made behind the counter. It's just a shelf with a photo of my mother, a tiny ceramic cat Kevin made when he was small, and a framed note. Rise again. I trace the letters with a stick of flour on my fingertip, and I smile. Not because the past has been cured, but because the present is alive. If you want a single line to take with you, don't wait for someone to choose you. Choose yourself. Build something honest. And when the choice becomes between silence and protection, choose protection. For yourself. For the people who will come after you. Thank you for listening. If this touched you, please like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments. What's the one life lesson you'd want everyone to hear? I'll be reading.